Before we dive into this incredible story, if you want to stay updated on military intelligence, strategic operations, and the hidden stories behind modern warfare, hit that subscribe button and join the IntelX community. Now, let's begin. The clocks read precisely 6:34 in the evening on September 28, 2025. Without warning, every radar display across Russia's western defense perimeter blazed crimson in unison. This wasn't some amateur drone incursion launched from a single vector. What materialized on those screens represented something far more sinister, a meticulously orchestrated assault converging on three distinct regions simultaneously: Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk. Behind the cover of residential areas north of Kharkiv, two HIMARS launcher units had silently maneuvered into their firing coordinates, completely invisible to Russian surveillance. The stage was set for what would become one of the most sophisticated military operations of the entire conflict. Russian air defense operators watched in growing alarm as waves of aerial threats penetrated deep across the border from Ukrainian-controlled territory. These weren't your standard improvised quadcopters. Intelligence quickly identified them as UJ-26 Bober extended-range platforms and Sheila 400 loitering munitions, each one carrying devastating payloads between 30 and 50 kilograms. Within moments, Panzer S-1 and Tor M2 battery commanders issued engagement orders. The darkness erupted into brilliant streaks of fire as surface-to-air missiles screamed skyward, tracers from anti-aircraft cannons painting deadly arcs through the night. Russian operators meticulously logged each confirmed kill, their ledgers growing with what appeared to be an overwhelming defensive victory. Their systems were performing flawlessly, the airspace seemed secure, but this comforting illusion of control was precisely what Ukrainian planners had calculated. While Russian gunners celebrated shooting down drone after drone, the genuine threat was advancing undetected, concealed behind the symphony of electronic warfare and aerial chaos. Then everything changed. At the exact moment when the defensive network was stretched to its operational limits, 6 completely different signatures materialized on Belgorod's tracking systems. These weren't horizontal flight profiles. These contacts were diving vertically downward from the edge of space itself, accelerating past Mach 2.5. The chatter in Russian command centers went silent. Everyone understood what they were witnessing. M31 GMLRS precision rockets, launched from those HIMARS batteries, were now plummeting toward their targets at hypersonic velocities. The Russian commander faced an impossible decision but made it instantly. He ordered the activation of their most closely guarded asset, an S-400 system that had remained deliberately silent until this critical moment, concealed in a location known only to the highest command echelons. The massive 92N6E gravestone radar array powered up, its electromagnetic beam locking onto all 6 incoming threats with remarkable speed. Within seconds, 48 N6DM. Interceptor missiles launched skyward at Mach 6, their rocket motors creating artificial suns against the night sky. Moments later, 6 massive detonations bloomed in the upper atmosphere. An operator's voice cut through the tension in the Russian command bunker. Complete elimination. All ballistic threats neutralized. 6 for 6. Relief and pride swept through the facility like a wave. They had just defeated the most complex layered attack in their operational history. But hundreds of kilometers away, inside a fortified Ukrainian command facility deep underground, there was no disappointment. Quite the opposite. The most critical phase of their plan had just succeeded beyond expectation. The operation's opening act had actually begun hours earlier. A massive swarm comprising hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles had been dispatched toward 8 separate Russian regions: Kursk, Bryansk, Belgorod, Tula, Yaroslavl, Rostov, Novgorod, and Samara. This represented one of the largest coordinated drone offensives Russia had encountered throughout the entire war. Yet its purpose was never to destroy targets. Its purpose was to create overwhelming chaos, a smokescreen of such magnitude that it would consume Russian attention entirely. While Moscow triumphantly declared victory, their military leadership remained completely unaware they had been maneuvered into an elaborate trap. This drone swarm was engineered specifically to occupy Russia's expensive defensive batteries, exhaust their ammunition stockpiles, and most critically, force their radar systems to focus in multiple directions simultaneously, because the actual objective was never in any of those 8 regions. The real target stood approximately 90 kilometers from Kharkiv, deep inside Russia's Belgorod Oblast. This was no ordinary installation. According to satellite intelligence and open-source verification platform, the Belgorod Thermal Power Station represented a strategic center of gravity, the beating heart of the entire region's military-industrial nervous system. This single facility supplied electrical power to the primary logistics and command infrastructure of Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army, the formation responsible for some of the most brutal combat operations throughout eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence understood that precisely because this target was so vital, it would be defended with extraordinary measures. And that's where Ukrainian ingenuity transformed into strategic brilliance, a deception operation designed to saturate and blind Russian air defenses. Inside that classified Ukrainian command bunker, an electronic warfare specialist's eyes locked onto a glowing signal on his monitor. Contact confirmed. We have precise coordinates, operational frequency, and emission strength of the S-400 radar system. Transmit fire mission to the second battery. Authorization to engage. At that instant, what the Russians celebrated as their greatest triumph revealed itself as a devastating deception. Those $6 million HIMARS rockets were never intended as strike weapons. They were the most sophisticated and expensive decoys in military history. Their sole mission was forcing that hidden S-400 system to activate, thereby exposing its exact location, electronic signature, and operational parameters. This created a catastrophic vulnerability in Russian defenses. The S-400's coordinates and frequency data were immediately transmitted to a second HIMARS battery waiting in a separate location, as well as to heavy kamikaze drones like the UJ-26 Bober already advancing toward the area. The real hunt had only just begun. The time was now 6:46 p.m. At a completely different position, the second HIMARS crew, which had maintained absolute radio silence, received their updated targeting package. A second 6-rocket salvo launched toward the primary objective, timed precisely for when the S-400 would either be reloading interceptors or undergoing the critical few-second recalibration cycle that follows major engagement. The actual target, the thermal power station, the lifeblood of Belgorod's entire energy infrastructure. As this second wave lifted off, the atmosphere of victory inside Russian command transformed into frozen horror. 6 new ballistic trajectories materialized on their displays. Voices erupted in controlled panic. The M31 rockets had already crossed into Russian airspace, requiring barely 40 seconds to reach their target from their near-space trajectory. Operators frantically attempted to re-engage the S-400, but the system remained in those critical seconds of vulnerability. Meanwhile, Panzer and Tor batteries were still fully engaged against the continuing waves of Bober and Sheila drones saturating the airspace, drones now deliberately vectoring toward the known positions of those S-400 launchers. As the HIMARS rockets entered their terminal dive phase, the S-400's radar array powered back online detected the incoming threats, and a Russian officer reached for his communications system to warn higher command. But at that precise instant, a UJ-26 Bober that had been flying nap of the Earth to avoid detection suddenly pitched upward into its final attack dive, aiming directly for the command vehicle housing the radar control station. The S-400's radar system was never designed to track and engage such small, low-altitude targets at point-blank range. The surrounding Panzer and Tor systems were completely occupied engaging other drone swarms approaching from different vectors. For just a handful of seconds, a lethal gap opened in the defensive network. When that UJ-26 Bober slammed its 40-kilogram warhead directly into the S-400's command brain, less than 30 seconds remained before the HIMARS rockets reached their destination. The gravestone radar screen flickered, then went dark. The only system capable of stopping the second wave had just been blinded at the moment it was needed most. Nothing could stop them now. At exactly 6:47 p.m., 6 HIMARS rockets, each programmed with circular error probable accuracy of less than 5 meters, struck the main transformer station, the absolute heart of Belgorod's power distribution grid, with surgical precision. This wasn't simply an explosion. It triggered an uncontrolled cascade reaction. The 90-kilogram unitary warheads instantly vaporized tons of steel and copper infrastructure. High-tension lines snapped like threads. A massive electrical arc turned night into daylight for miles around. Then the heart of the regional grid stopped beating. And then came absolute darkness. The energy supplied by the Belgorod thermal facility powered everything. The radar arrays that served as the eyes of regional S-300 and S-400 batteries, the sophisticated communication networks inside command shelters, and critically, the electrical signaling infrastructure that formed the lifeblood of the railway system transporting ammunition, fuel, and personnel to the front lines. Destroying this plant meant far more than turning off lights. It meant blinding an army's vision, severing its communications, and crippling its mobility. When the power grid collapsed, it triggered a domino effect across the entire region. Water pumping stations ceased operation. Internet connectivity vanished. Normal life for 500,000 people ground to a virtual standstill. As hours stretched on, the situation evolved from crisis into existential catastrophe. People trapped in elevator shafts, traffic gridlock from non-functioning signals, merchants limited to cash-only transactions, heating systems failed, water supplies cut off. The entire internet and cellular communication infrastructure collapsed into silence. Miles-long queues formed at gas stations. Residents fought over generator fuel. Crowds stormed supermarkets in panic-buying frenzies. This was total societal breakdown. While Russia's defense ministry triumphantly announced they had shot down 230 UAVs, they remained completely unaware they had walked directly into a massive trap. When Belgorod's governor issued his statement at 7:07 p.m., the Kremlin was confronted with the bitter reality. The defense ministry's propaganda about intercepting hundreds of targets collapsed instantly when Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov made his panicked confession, acknowledging an attack on critical infrastructure and widespread power failures. On the evening of September 28th, Russian state media attempted to characterize the incident as a mere transformer malfunction. Within seconds, this narrative was demolished by NASA's firm satellite system detecting massive thermal signatures in the area, and by civilian videos spreading across social media showing the true scope of devastation. This operation represented a massive military symphony in which more than 230 UAVs served a single unified purpose, ensuring that a handful of HIMARS rockets reached their intended target. And when those rockets found their mark, they destroyed far more than a power facility. They shattered Russia's myth of invulnerability. Ukraine's precision strike operation against the Belgorod Thermal Power Station on September 28, 2025 will be recorded in military history as a pivotal turning point in this war. The consequences extended far beyond destroyed transformers and darkened cities. It represented a catastrophic systems collapse that fundamentally challenged Russia's established military doctrine. Russian strategic thinking has always been predicated on keeping warfare far beyond its own borders. The Belgorod operation demonstrated painfully that this doctrine has become obsolete in an era of long-range precision weapons in Ukrainian hands. The concept of a traditional frontline ceased to exist. A rocket launched from Kharkiv could strike Moscow's backyard. The psychological impact on frontline soldiers was devastating in every sense of the word. To truly appreciate the genius of this attack, you must first understand the target itself. The Belgorodskaya Power Station wasn't some randomly selected civilian infrastructure. It was the heart of an entire region's military-industrial nerve network, a strategic center of gravity. Ukraine's objective wasn't the megawatts the plant generated. The real target was everything that depended on those megawatts: the rail lines supplying Russia's southern front, the factories manufacturing ammunition, and the command centers directing troop movements. According to analysis from organizations like the Institute for the Study of War, Belgorod Oblast functioned as an indispensable rear base for Russian operations inside Ukraine. This region specifically sustained the main supply and command infrastructure of Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army, the formation responsible for the bloodiest campaigns in eastern Ukraine. The uninterrupted, stable electrical power provided by this plant was absolutely essential for every component of this massive military apparatus to function. A power failure meant that ammunition storage facilities, armored vehicle maintenance depots, electronic signals intelligence stations, and most critically, the forward command posts managing troop operations would all be instantly plunged into darkness and silence. Yes, these facilities had backup generators, but a generator cannot continuously rotate the excessive radar antennas of an S-400 system for extended periods. Nor can it simultaneously and reliably power strategic satellite communication terminals or all the barracks housing thousands of soldiers with consistent voltage. That night, Russian commanders found themselves transported from 21st century network-centric warfare back into the analog darkness of 20th century operations. Encrypted communication channels went dead. Situational awareness displays went black. The flow of real-time battlefield intelligence from forward positions was severed like cutting an artery. It was equivalent to cutting off the oxygen supply to an army's brain. The wheels of the industrial war machine also ground to a sudden halt. Industrial facilities in and around Belgorod had rapidly converted to producing ammunition, military equipment components, and repair services following the war's onset. Facilities such as the Karachevsky electromechanical plant in Bryansk region, which had been previously targeted, specialized in developing and manufacturing critical electrical connectors for military and industrial applications. The power outage was like jamming a crowbar into the gears of this enormous production apparatus. Production lines stopped with a deafening screech. Machinery pressing artillery shells fell silent. Robotic arms welding tank armor hung frozen in mid-operation. Modern industry requires stable, high-quality electrical power. The fluctuating, inconsistent power from backup generators cannot operate precision CNC machining equipment or assembly lines producing complex electronic components. Every hour that passed meant hundreds fewer artillery rounds manufactured, dozens fewer vehicles repaired, and truckloads of ammunition that never reached the front. But the most devastating link in this cascade emerged when it struck the railway network, the steel backbone of Russia's entire military logistics system. Russian military doctrine depends heavily on rail transport to move massive quantities of materiel and personnel across vast distances. Belgorod served as one of the most critical junctions in this network. The lines running through this hub connected resources from Russia's interior to Donbas and Crimea via Rostov in the south. A substantial portion of these lines operates on electrified systems. When the power failed, all signaling, switch control, and communication systems managing these rail lines shut down instantaneously. Fuel tanker trains, ammunition freight cars, troop transport trains all became trapped in Belgorod's darkened maze. Russian logistics collapsed in a single moment. Using only a few hundred kilograms of explosives, Ukraine managed to neutralize tens of thousands of tons of steel and thousands of soldiers without firing a single additional shot. The military brilliance of the Belgorod operation lies not only in selecting the optimal target, but in the multi-layered deception strategy employed to reach it. This was a masterclass in reinterpreting classical military tactics through 21st century technology. The most audacious and ingenious element of the operation was utilizing the first HIMARS salvo as sacrificial bait, deliberately sacrificing 6 GMLRS rockets, each valued at approximately $170,000, knowing they would be intercepted required ice-cold risk calculation. However, the strategic payoff vastly exceeded the cost. This operation left Moscow facing an impossible dilemma: protect frontline forces or protect strategic bits. Depth infrastructure. Doing both perfectly simultaneously was no longer possible. Following this attack, Russia was forced to withdraw some of its most advanced air defense systems from forward positions and redeploy them to protect cities like Belgorod and Kursk, as well as other critical infrastructure sites. Every S-400 or Panzer battery withdrawn from the front opened new windows of opportunity for Ukrainian air operations, drone strikes, and cruise missile attacks. To protect its own territory, Russia had to leave occupied territory more vulnerable. This represented a brilliant victory of intelligence over brute force, strategy over raw power. This operation proved conclusively that modern warfare is no longer fought solely on front lines between armor and trenches, but at critical junctures throughout an adversary's strategic depth. Through perfect synchronization of technology, intelligence, and psychological operations, Ukraine didn't merely strike a target. They forced their adversary to use its own strength against itself, delivering an absolute masterclass in the art of contemporary warfare. If this deep dive into modern military strategy fascinated you, make sure you're subscribed to IntelX. We break down the operations that change wars, the intelligence that shapes conflicts, and the stories that never make headlines. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us for the next one.